So thank you
Okay.
everyone for joining us. Appreciate you bearing with us. Again, I'm Josh Levine, one of the partners and senior financial advisors at Telemus. And as we move into the summer months, many people are looking forward to enjoying themselves outside, but we recognize that this is a new normal. It still means getting together with family and friends at a comfortable social distance for food, pool, lake, and beverage. So today we're fortunate to have an expert in the field of alcoholic beverage distribution join us for a conversation about the industry and the effect on the economy. So our guest today is Howard Wolpin. Howard, how are you? Thanks for joining us
Hi,
today.
Josh. How you doing?
Good, good. So before we get into the questions, I just want to give a little background on Howard. So Howard's a third generation owner of a family beverage distribution business. He launched Great Lakes Consulting recently after about 30 plus years in the family business to help business leaders of all kinds develop growth strategies, improve revenue generation, enhance company cultures, and much more. Howard has extensive knowledge in all aspects of business development and operation with a track record of success and growth. He grew his family's business to more than 50% market share at a very difficult time in Detroit when the city was undergoing bankruptcy, population loss, and other challenges. So using his background, experience, proven strategies, and vast network, he's able to quickly assess a company's health and determine what's needed to grow, optimize, and market the businesses. So Howard, I have a few questions for you. Questions are also going to come in throughout the webinar. And just a reminder for everybody, if you have a question, just go to the bottom of your screen. You can hit the Q&A button, type it in, and we'll make sure to address them. So first, Howard, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into the beverage distribution business to start?
Well, again, thanks for having me. I was pretty much born and raised in the beverage industry. Like you said, I'm a third generation. My grandfather began the business. My father took over when my grandfather passed away, and my father really had the foresight to buy up a lot of other distributors and turned the company into what it became today. And I spent many years learning all facets of the industry. My dad put me through what I would call the Walter Wolpin School of Business, learning all aspects of the beverage industry. And after 30 years of working in the trade and working with customers and suppliers, I gained a vast knowledge of not just the beer side of the alcoholic industry, but pretty much all sides of the beverage industry. And, I feel like 30 years is a long time to be doing what I did.
Sure. So, with that as a backdrop, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's transpired, in the industry since the pandemic has started?
Well, the pandemic has really affected a multitude of aspects, from restaurants to sporting venues to casinos to, all the places that were shut down. Had a significant impact, obviously, on volumes. There are ways that people found to drink outside of those venues. So the beneficiaries of that were obviously box stores, large stores such as Myers, Kroger's, Target's, Costco's, because people were locked in at home. Couldn't go to a restaurant to drink, so they started drinking at home. Many people have asked me what happened to consumption. So, depending upon what area you are in, Wayne County in Michigan obviously was significantly hurt because of the loss of sporting events, concerts. Opening day is a huge event for beer. And a lot of that volume was transferred pretty much into Oakland County, where people were going into stores and buying, beer at a greater rate because at one point people were hoarding beer because they thought they were going to run out. But yeah, the restaurants and the hospitality end of things have taken a significant hit. Obviously, without sports, that is a significant loss of volume also. But that has been made up by people going into stores and purchasing, beer. One other aspect that we've seen is a sort of transference of people who would normally go in and buy craft beers for, $9.99 a six pack, say, because they're on unemployment and don't have as much money, they've transferred to cheaper, less expensive beers. The beneficiaries of that being Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light, beers that are maybe $4.99 a six pack, not $9.99. So if you can go into Costco and pay $15.99 for a case of beer, you're going to pay that versus the $9.99 you would have been paying when you were working. And the millennials are the primary consumers of the craft beers. And I'm certain that a lot of the unemployment that we're seeing in this country has hit the millennial generation pretty hard. So therefore, the sort of losers in this pandemic have been the craft beer industry. It'll be interesting going forward to see who will survive. And in my opinion, I believe you'll see a significant decline in the number of craft beer companies, because the small guys that don't have the capital to stay and survive this, they'll be the losers. The winners will be the recognizable craft beers, the Founders, the Shorts, the Bells, the ones that are very well known to the younger generation, who are the main consumers of those craft beers. One other aspect that is interesting is 10, 15 years ago, if you'd walk into a bar, maybe you saw 4 or 5 draft beers. Today, you could walk into a bar and see anywhere from 50 to 100. Those days are over. With restaurants being unable to fully allow the restaurant to be at capacity, there's only dollars available to spend to purchase alcohol, whether it be beer, whether it be vodka. And I'm sure most people who frequent restaurants and see how many different vodkas are on the bar, I don't think you'll see that anymore. And I really don't think you'll be able to go to restaurants that'll have 40 or 50 choices of draft beers anymore, because they won't know how many people are coming for dinner X night. And because you can't sit in a bar and wait for your table, so you're not going to be able to sit and have a drink while you wait, are all factors that are playing into how the pandemic has really changed the way people drink, how much they're willing to spend, and what restaurateurs will be willing to do in terms of storing, product, because they don't want to put money out and have it sit on their floor and not get consumed. So those are a couple of things that have really changed due to the pandemic.
Sure. And you actually alluded to one of the questions that came through, which was, talking a little bit about the short and the long-term impacts on various industries, discussing the fact that the craft companies, you see that they're going to take a big hit there. But how about from the distributor standpoint, the kind of from the distributors on the amount of alcohol they're providing to both, I think you had told me about this earlier when we talked, the on-premise and the off-premise, what's the impact to them? as far as the take home versus the, consuming or enjoying beverages in a,
Right.
public setting?
Yeah. So just to give the people listening that there's two ways you can purchase product and consume. One is through the off-premise segment, which is where you buy the product at the location, but you must take it away and consume it away from the location. Those would be the Myers and the Krogers of the world. And then there is the on-premise category, which would be your venues, your casinos, your restaurants, your bars. And we call that the on-premise, where the product is purchased at the location and consumed on the premise at the location. We also discussed, you and I, about the fact that how much volume is done in the off-premise segment versus the on-premise. For us, it was about 75-25. 75% of the product was being purchased in the off-premise category, 25% being purchased in the on-premise. That is for sure going to change, because until restaurants are allowed to go back to full capacity, the amount of volume they're going to do is going to decrease. The off-premise will increase, because until people feel safe to go to restaurants and until they can go back to full capacity, people are eating at home. So they're going to the off-premise locations, purchasing their beer, taking it home, purchasing their vodka or their tequila or their bourbons, and they're going home and consuming at home. So the winners of this right now will be the off-premise segment, and that's where the volume will grow. And obviously the on-premise category will suffer significantly until there's the ability for not only people to feel safe, but until restaurants can go back to having full capacity.
Well, and you addressed it kind of in your last two comments, but one of the questions that came through was regard to restaurants. So if restaurants are only able to operate at half capacity, really the question relates to craft beers. Do you see a hold on spending for the high-priced craft beers because the restaurant's only going to purchase cheaper beers in order to serve?
Yeah, I think that for sure will happen. I think the restaurants will still want to maintain a certain amount of craft beer, but I think because of the amount of, craft beers traditionally are a lot more expensive than your Bud Lights and your Budweisers of the world. So the number of draft handles will probably significantly decline for the craft industry, but they'll still be there. There just won't be as many. Whether restaurants will choose to go all craft and not take on some of the Bud Lights of the world, that'll I think that's to be determined. Until restaurants can get a handle on what people are willing to spend and how much they're willing to spend at this time. And if people start to come in and ask for craft beers, then I think restaurants they'll have to be, they'll have to go back to the craft side. But I think what you're going to see right now is more of a split 50-50 versus what you used to see, which was probably 80 to 90% of draft beer was craft, and maybe 10 to 15% of it was, premium beers like the Budweisers of the world, like the Bud Lights, like the Coors Lights and the Miller Lights. So I think it's really a question of how people are going to react going forward and how much money they're willing to spend. And, obviously once people get off unemployment, there's going to be even less discretionary income going around until people get back to work. So I think for the time being, until there's a significant increase in the employment rate, people are going to stick with the cheaper beers. And
How about,
it's not good for either the hospitality people. It's not good for the wholesalers, because the margins are better, obviously, for the higher end beers. And when you push a consumer to a lower not a lower product, but a less expensive product,
Sure.
they don't make as much money. And so I think that's another issue that will face restaurants significantly. Years.
So, keeping with that theme, we had a question come in asking about margin implications from a shift from the on-premise to the off-premise. So, do you think that there's going to be less provisions for those on-premise? I mean, are the distributors going to make that active choice or ride it out, or kind of what's your thought there?
I think that the ultimate decision rests with the retailer themselves as to how much are they willing to spend for a keg of beer, and how long will that keg sit there? Will people drink it at the higher price point? If not, you'll probably, like I said, you'll see that shift down to the less expensive beers.
How about, so another question came in, Howard. How far did the Michigan executive order go to buy back spirits to help restaurants? And do you think it really made a significant positive financial impact?
Well, I think if it had been done sooner, it would have saved a lot of people a lot of money. Unfortunately, there was a lot of beer that was sitting in a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars, the casinos, that had they been able to go in there and get that beer out of there sooner, they would have had a better chance of selling it before the expiration date. Beer does have expiration dates, but some suppliers were willing to extend those dates so that once we were able to go in and get the beer out of these accounts, it gave us a chance to sell it before it eventually went old. It should have been done sooner, but that was just unfortunately the way it worked out. There was talk of possibly reimbursement to wholesalers, but that did not happen. So they're in the process of picking up beer, and a lot of it will probably get dumped.
We had a couple questions come in, all relating to a similar theme. So, we're talking about consumer shifts from craft beer to more economical choices. In this case, we've only discussed beer, but what about the alternatives and the rise of, seltzers, and kind of what's your thought there?
That's an interesting question. It's one that a lot of people have asked me. Is beer in and of itself faces competition from a multitude of different areas. One is now the seltzer business. I've seen in the past ice beers become the fad. I can talk about 2 to 3 years ago, everybody was drinking ciders. You don't hear much about cider anymore. Now you hear about seltzer. How long will seltzer last? I don't know. I think maybe you'll get another year, possibly 2. But people's taste preferences change. There's no more loyalty in the beverage industry. You're also fighting this battle where young kids of beer drinking age today, who usually would have been beer drinkers 10 years ago when they were 25, 26, they're drinking tequilas, they're drinking bourbons, they're drinking whiskeys, and they're drinking seltzers. So that's definitely hurting the beer side of things. And you also have the legalization of marijuana. So there's only so much discretionary income to go around to support whatever the consumer wants to drink. And right now they want to drink seltzers and they want to drink tequilas. And I don't see the seltzer business, just my personal opinion. I think you'll maybe get another year or two, but there'll be another fad that'll come along, and the next generation will choose something else to grasp onto. Just like I said, you know, 2 summers ago, people couldn't get enough cider. There weren't enough ciders. Today, I mean, there's probably maybe 10 to 12 seltzers out there competing against each other. How many can survive? Eventually, you know, White Claw is still the hot one, truly is doing very well. Bud Light seltzer to come on, but how many seltzers can really survive? So you'll eventually see them, the smaller guys that can't make it, they'll go away. But the beer industry fights that battle against, you know, alternative beverages, flavored alcoholic beverages. And like I said, alcohol and marijuana also, you know, takes money away from the beer industry.
So with that in mind, I mean, what beverages do have the sustainability, and why? What makes for a sustainable beverage going forward?
Well, I think beer will always be sustainable. I mean, it's proven its ability to survive through all the different fads that we've seen. It's like I said, it's the fact that there's no more loyalty anymore. And that's the part that would be discerning to me if I was in the seltzer business or in some other alcoholic type beverage business. You know, you look at how many vodkas are out there, and, you know, one day it could be Tito's, one day it could be Ciroc, one day it could be Belvedere. But, you know, people just don't have a loyalty to anything anymore. You know, some people only want a certain vodka, and then some people say, you know, I'll have a vodka on the rocks. They don't really give a preference anymore. But I can assure you that through this pandemic and in the future going forward, especially like I said in the restaurants, there won't be that whole wall of liquor like there was in the past. It just can't. It's too much. You're putting out too much money to, you know, potentially have one person come in and ask for that product. And so you're going to force people to drink what you've got in your restaurant or hotel or bar, and not offer them 80 choices. It's going to be too hard.
So another question that came in, Howard, do you think, is there a chance that the on-premise sales at manufacturing sites, so, you know, breweries, distilleries, wineries, actually improve as a result of all of this? And because then the question's related to how does the pricing at big box / taverns compare to pricing at breweries, wineries, and distilleries? Or is it just completely different?
There's the wineries themselves, you know, obviously they were shut down too. So, you know, bars obviously charge a higher price for a bottle of beer than what you're going to pay when you walk into a store. Breweries, you know, I'm kind of not understanding whether people think that you can go into a brewery and consume the product. Is that what they're insinuating?
I think that may be some of it, or consuming, or even just from a purchasing standpoint.
Breweries don't. You could do a brewery tour and go in and consume a brewery in a beer in a tasting room, but you can't go to a brewery, walk in, buy beer, and sit down and drink beer. Wineries, different story. Once they do start to open, you know, again, they'll be in the same position as a restaurant. X amount of people, social distancing, and are people willing to go and sit in a winery and do that? You know, it's just no different than a restaurant. It's all going to be what people are willing to do and when they're willing to do it. And how will that affect the wineries? No different than a restaurant. there'll be less people there, less consumption, and time will tell when people are ready to get back out there. And second wave of this, and they start to shut things down again, which I hope they don't do. You'll be in the same. They'll be in the same position again.
How about switching gears? From a marketing standpoint, why don't we see beer commercials anymore? Why is there no? What happened to Spuds McKenzie and those popular icons?
Yeah, the days of Spuds McKenzie and the Frogs and Cedric the Entertainer. That's basically been brought about by the change in social media. The generation that we try to, sell our beer to, they're not watching TV. They're streaming Netflix. They're on Hulu. They're on Facebook. They're on Twitter. They're on Snapchat. So we were forced to market ourselves away from traditional media, which was, basically you didn't spend 10 minutes on TV watching a sporting event without seeing some sort of beer commercial. But today's generation, that's not where their focus is. So we've moved away from, the traditional TV. We still do some radio, but you've got to be where the young, age person who's eligible to drink, where are they? They're not on TV. They're streaming, and they're on Facebook, and they're on, those types of things where you take your media dollars and you put them there. And that's why you don't see these fun commercials that, we all used to know and love. I mean, there were some pretty great commercials out there back in the day, but you just don't see that anymore. And I don't think, for the time being, I don't think you're going to see it for a long time.
So a couple questions I'm combining here, but, so if you're thinking about a startup in this business, I mean, is there room for a startup? And, or is the end more of just more consolidation and acquisitions and, big companies getting bigger?
I think what you'll see is more companies getting bigger. I think because the smaller craft guys who, are local to certain states, they just don't have the money, in my opinion, to survive. Especially if you start to see, the draft part of the industry, shrink. So the question will become, are the large brewers willing to go out and maybe spend some money to buy up some of these guys cheaper than they would have paid now? Or will they just let them go by the wayside? Right before the pandemic, you had Atwater Brewing get purchased, which was, again, a sign of more consolidation. And I think that's where we're headed. The little guys are going to go away, and some of these bigger craft guys are probably going to need cash infusions because obviously they weren't selling a lot of beer. To me, I think a lot of them are out looking to try to sell themselves. I would be, because I think the longer that this goes on, the tougher it will be for them to find a buyer. And I think there are large brewers who would be interested in, if they could get a good deal on a craft beer. And craft beers are so segmented because by state. Our state has Founders, Shorts, and Bells. California has, I think there's a craft brewery in every city. Portland has theirs. Seattle has. Every city's got a multitude of small craft brewers. And so I just don't see how they can survive. It's just, if there's money out there to be lent or borrowed, maybe they could buy themselves some time to see if this changes. But until the volume grows in the restaurants and the hospitality area, which is where they do sell a significant amount of volume, I just don't know if there's viability for as many as there are.
Sure. Another question came in, and you had touched on it a little bit earlier, but the question's about, from a distribution standpoint, do you have any idea, how much, I would assume down, but maybe not given the off-premise purchases, but how much is distribution down maybe year over year from this time last year? And, how much have we seen as far as an uptick over the last, say, 30 days?
Well, when you talk distribution, I think it's more you're talking about sales, and it depends on where you're talking about. Our area of Wayne County is down significantly because it's so heavily event dependent. Oakland County and Macomb County they're hanging in there. And that goes back to the fact that people are drinking at home. So they're going to the stores and they're buying beer and going home. The restaurant business is, like I said, Wayne County before the pandemic was really a hot spot. There was growth. There were restaurants, more people down there than I'd ever seen in all the years that I've worked in Detroit. And then in one day, everything is gone. Everything is shut down. Nobody's there working. Nobody's having lunch. Nobody's eating dinner. Nobody's going to baseball games. We lost all the basketball games, all the hockey games, all the concerts that were canceled. So, until that comes back, Wayne County is going to be tough. But if you're in an area that's suburban, where you're not dependent on people going to events and things like that, but they're outside barbecuing now and they're having people over and social distancing, I think Oakland and Macomb counties will do well. And I think areas that are dependent on events like Wayne County are going to suffer significantly.
We had a question come in. How about wine? Any thoughts on how wine is doing, or is this just a completely different animal? From the beer industry.
I think the wine business is doing really well. I think wine is, it's funny. I look at my daughters and it's rosé all day, so rosés are hot. When it's hot outside, people want to drink rosé wines. They don't want to drink red wine. They want to drink a nice cold rosé. And, it's, the wine business is going to survive. People want to drink wine. Before this pandemic happened, there were a lot of new wine drinkers, a lot of people wanting to try wines, getting into wine. And wine is easily accessible to get, whether you're buying it at there's plenty of wine stores to go to. It can be shipped into this state. And before the pandemic, a lot of people were really getting into wine. It was cool and they wanted to try the new wines. And, there's so many new wineries. I mean, Napa is just inundated with wineries. So, yeah, I think the wine business, obviously it's suffering too because a lot of wine is consumed in restaurants. And now, again, the retailer has to decide how much wine will I carry today versus what I carried before the pandemic. So, these are all questions that will really be determined once we somehow get past these crazy times. But wine is, still doing well, but it's in the same position as, like I said, it's a restaurant type product that gets consumed there. Lots of people are drinking wine at home. I can guarantee you that. It's funny that, people that used to maybe have a glass a night are having 2 or 3 glasses a night. People are sitting home with nothing to do. So what do? They open up a bottle of wine and crack it and have a good time. So yeah, it's also restaurant and venue dependent.
So another question came in, more related to business question for you. So, it wasn't in the intro, but on one of your bios, you took over in 2006, right? And bought the business, your family business in 2006. So of course, right before another financial crisis that we went through. And so the question is, how were you able to grow your business so effectively over the years? And, what tips can you provide, for scale?
Yeah. So, my philosophy was to run my business as not a distribution company, but as a sales and marketing company. And I wasn't afraid to spend money to get volume. And what I mean by that is, if there was a concert, coming to downtown, for example, it was called DEMP. It was a music festival, 2 days. We bought the rights to the festival. We were the sponsors. You pay a fee for that. It costs you money. You give up margin when you do that. But I was always of the belief that I would rather spend that money and have the people that are attending the event drinking my product rather than my competitors. Because every time somebody is drinking one of my competitors' products, it leads them to the potential that they'll drink it again. So I used a lot of dollars to market my product and wasn't afraid to spend money. And giving up some margin to maintain volume and grow your volume. I know there's people that might say, well, that's, why would you do that? Why would you give up margin? That philosophy is really what got us to where we were when I sold, which was over 50% market share. It was, I don't know how many people attend opening day, but if you attended opening day and went to all the parties, I wasn't afraid to sponsor the events that were being done. Even though we weren't a sponsor of the Tigers, our goal was to try to dominate every account and make sure that if somebody went in, you had to have the look. You have to have the look of the leader to be the leader. And that means you got to spend money. And so that's what I did. I spent a lot of money on a lot of events. I convinced my suppliers, mainly Anheuser-Busch, to become the sponsors at Little Caesars Arena, to sponsor all the concert venues down in Detroit. If you went to any concert venue, St. Andrews, Majestic, they were all sponsored by one of my suppliers. And so I was not afraid to give up money to get volume. And I think that was the real reason why we grew as we did, because as people came into Detroit, they were drinking our beer. And yeah, I gave up some margin, but it's really what grew our business.
One question came in. What's your favorite beer, Howard?
My go-to is Stella. I'm not those high ABV alcohol by volume beers are a little too heavy for me. I know that the young kids, they really like it. They like drinking beers with high alcohol. They get a little buzz faster, but I find Stella to be a really good Belgian ale that's, It's easy to drink. Um, I've never been a light beer drinker. I like a little more flavor to my beer. So Stella is really, it's always been my go-to.
Great. Couple more here. We're
Yeah.
getting to the end of our time. So where do you think the alcohol beverage industry goes from here?
I think once we get through this strange period in our lives, the industry will come back strong. The alcoholic beverage industry has always survived through, like you said, when Detroit went through bankruptcy and the significant loss of population, our volume continued to grow. So I think you'll still see people gravitate to beer. You'll still see the younger kids gravitating to the tequilas and the bourbons and the whiskeys. And I think you'll find a lot more people coming into the wine part of it. I see a lot of people really wanting to learn about wine. I have a lot of wine in my house. People want to come over, try the wines that they've never, they can't get their hands on, that they can't find. And wine wine's here to stay too. And I'll tell you this, I jokingly laughed about the rosé, but they're putting wine in cans now. That is the largest growing category within the wine industry is canned wines. And I have been sent 4 or 5 to evaluate for a venture capital firm that I've been helping evaluate certain beverages and whether they should invest. They're very good. I would have never thought that I would drink wine out of a can and say, that's pretty good. And, my kids were home, they're drinking rosé out of a can. So, you're going to continuously see innovation in all segments of the industry. Everybody, I don't know why, but everybody wants to be in the alcohol industry for some reason. But what they don't understand is it's really difficult to break in. I mean, you're fighting against companies like Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors who have significant marketing budgets that, you have to realize how are you going to compete against them? And your only avenue, if you're a beer person, is you need to find a distribution network. And so that means you got to go out and find a network of distributors who are willing to take on your product. And you might laugh at this, but when I came here in 1988, we had 150 SKUs. That's 150 different packages that we sold, whether that was 6-pack bottles, 12-pack bottles, 40-ounce bottles, whatever. Today, we have over 1,400. I sell over 600 beers, and I have 68 suppliers. In 1988, I had 8. So how I always say to people when they want to get into it, I said, you really want to go in and compete against these people? Do you have the capital and the wherewithal to compete against the Anheuser-Busch's and the Miller Coorses of the world who have all these unlimited marketing dollars? But they want to try. I mean, I've had people send me drinks I've never even heard of. Mezcal. I didn't even know what Mezcal was when it was sent to me, but it's the nature of the way the industry is going is people want to be in this business for some reason. And I think that's where we're headed. More innovation, more people trying to break in with, and not necessarily just on the alcohol side, on the non-alcoholic side too. I mean, we started with a brand called Fever Tree. It's basically a brand of mixers. it became a really hot commodity. Everybody wanted it. It was cool. It was, a nice little bottle, 7-ounce bottle. You put it on the bar. There's numerous people coming out with new tea brands. I mean, I see so many different things that, the industry is going to survive. What it will look like is a good question. But like I said, it'll be smaller amounts of craft brewers. There'll be a shift to the lower priced beers, and there'll be more innovation. And, how long seltzer will last, I don't know, because I don't know when that next innovation will be that will take away from the seltzer business. But for now, seltzer is what people want to drink. And I think in the future, you'll continue to see more innovation.
All right, Howard. So you mentioned it a little bit before, but I just wanted to get into it and ask you again. You mentioned you were giving some advice to some private equity companies. And so, what are you doing now? Who are the people that you're talking to and advising, and what are you telling them?
Josh, I felt like once I had sold my business that I had a wide range of skills that I had learned over the course of, running my business and being involved in Michigan Beer and Wine Wholesalers on their executive board for 20 some years, and was lucky enough to be asked to be on the Anheuser-Busch wholesaler panel. And I learned a lot, not just about the beverage industry, but, along with the things I did, negotiating union contracts and sat on a board that oversaw retiree healthcare money. I felt like I had such a wide range of knowledge on many different areas that I felt like I could help people in their endeavors trying to make their businesses better. And there were many occasions where people would call me and, they would ask me for advice. I would give them advice, and then I would hang up the phone and I would say, wow, everybody's tapping into that knowledge. Why don't I open a consulting business and tell people from now on, I'll be more than happy to, let you tap into my brain and the knowledge that's there and the things that I've learned. But I felt like I should get paid for that. So I started the consulting business. I have a website, which people can go to, GreatLakesBeverageConsulting.com. It's pretty simple. Gives a bit of an explanation about who I am and what I've done. And, I think people are looking for help. And sometimes they don't realize that, there's more to it than a simple 15 or 20-minute phone call. But I realized I can help people. It's not easy to find clients because people don't realize that there are people like me out there that, have spent so much time in one industry. And they think that purely my knowledge is in the beverage business, but I was involved in so many other aspects over the years that I just felt like I had enough of a skill set to help people outside of simply just the beverage industry. And so that's why
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I was going to say, so, to be clear, you're not just advising people that are looking to get into the beverage industry. It's all kinds of business, correct?
Yeah. I mean, listen, like I had mentioned earlier in our conversation, I ran a business through, some of the most difficult times that any business could face. And we came through it and we were better, stronger. And I think going through that tough period, I learned so much more about how to run a business and how to, keep your employees happy, how to make sure that they trust you and that they respect you and know that you're there. And, I ran my business. It was like a family business. I knew everybody's, husbands, wives, significant others. I knew about their kids. And, that's a lot of what's important in the business world today is, people want to really feel like they connect with the person who's in charge. And, those are some of the skills that I think I can bring to people. And it comes from the 35 years of running a business and learning that skill set. Some managers and owners, they don't all have that ability, but I thought that was one of my strengths, was just, I inured my employees to me, and I was out in the field fighting the battle with them every day. And like I said, when you go through those tough times and you can survive that, those are the things I think I can bring to people. And I would love the ability to help anybody who wants to not only get in the beverage industry, but if they're trying to start a business, or they have a business that they think somebody could come in and look at and say, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I think I can help them do that. And, the one thing I tell everybody that calls me for a consultation is, do you have a business plan? Do you have a 3-year strategic plan? And you'd be surprised at how many people, they say no. And I say, well, how can you know if you're executing your business properly if you don't have a plan that 3 years down the road you can go back and look at it and say, okay, well, we achieved this and we didn't achieve that. And I think those are the kinds of things I'm able to sit down with people and help them do. And I've done them myself, through, I sat on long range planning committees with Michigan Beer and Wine, and we put our plan together, and every 3 years we met and we looked at the plan and said, good, bad, what we do right, what we do wrong. And then we bring them up with another 3-year plan. So that's just how I think I can help people, And I know there's people out there that, especially today, with businesses having been closed down and now having to reopen, I think people could really benefit from my services.
Well, great. Well, we're right at the end here. And so we've talked about a lot of different things, what's going on in the current environment. So what's the message you want to leave with our audience now, Howard?
I think the message is that the beverage industry is continuously changing and evolving. If anybody has beverages that they think can be successful, don't be afraid to try. But the Gatorades and the vitamin waters of the world that become giant successes are few and far between. And I always try to temper people's expectations. And, you had asked me about beer. Beer will never go away. Beer will always be here. It's not a fad. So I would leave people with, try everything. Try the new products that will come down the road, and there will be many. I've seen them all, and just enjoy the industry. It's a great industry. And if anybody's interested in learning more, go to my website, call me. I'd love to talk to you.
Great. Well, really appreciate it, Howard. I really enjoyed doing this. I'm sure our audience did as well. And just a reminder for everyone, if you want more information, you can go through our website, telemus.com, contact us. We can get you in touch with Howard, get you information on anything else you need. And with that, I will sign off. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Josh.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Yeah, bye-bye.